To a special edition of the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster, and today we wanted to talk a little bit about CBDs. CBDs are obviously growing in popularity, and we thought it would be a great idea to have our friend James Commerford from Replenishing Care and Technologies come on to talk about the CBD he uses in his Replenishing Care model, and to talk generally about what CBDs are, and for those who may be wanting to know more, have James on to answer some questions. So without further ado, I would like to introduce from Replenishing Care and Technologies, James Commerford. How you doing, James?
I'm doing very well, Mike. Nice to be here again.
Now, for those who may not have heard our last show, if there's anybody out there, because it's kind of like The Godfather. I think everybody's heard it now, James. Could you explain a little bit what the Replenishing Care and Technologies model is?
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. It's kind of you caught me off guard a little bit with that comparison. So anyway, Replenishing Care and Technologies is a personal best performance and personal best fitness system that helps people perform at their best by basically helping their bodies heal and repair at their best. It's something we've been working at for quite a number of years. Most of what we work with has been law of attraction type stuff, and as we get into the discussion today, you'll see that this is another example of that.
All right, James. So where does CBD fit into the Replenishing Care and Technologies?
Well, basically, the way that we have put together our model is we've stacked 11 plus cellular health technologies together, and these either give cells the resources to perform, heal, and repair, or they help restore the body to homeostasis and balance. If you know much or anything at all about CBDs, you'll know that they would fit into the second group because CBDs are all about helping the body stay in homeostasis.
Yeah, so James, do you want to talk a little bit about the importance of homeostasis for a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hear the term homeostasis quite often, and it can be one of those things you really don't give much thought to as to what it really means, or you sort of assume you do. Essentially, homeostasis refers to the ability of an organism or environment to maintain stability in spite of changes. And if you think of the human body and the stress we live in, and, you know, whether it's work or, you know, the news or the weather or what have you, you know, we're constantly in a, I don't want to use the word battle or struggle, but let's say there's a continuing effort to stay in homeostasis. And the human body is actually full of examples of that. You got our temperature, basically glucose, blood pressure, pH balance, water, all of those kinds of things are examples of homeostatic, you know, situations. And the reason that CBDs are growing in popularity has to do with a system called the endocannabinoid system. And I'll say as kind of a sidebar, if anyone listening to this today takes nothing away from our discussion except an awareness of the endocannabinoid system, they'll have gained something. I mean, it's something that every mother and father, every coach and trainer should be discussing with their children or with those that they take care of or help train, if you will. Just for me personally, I got so intrigued by ECS when I first read about it. I literally went under a tarp for about 6 weeks to learn about it, and it became, you know, part of my own due diligence about getting involved with CBDs generally and the product I work with specifically. And I'll just do another sidebar. We created a website called POP, replenishingpcrcbd.com. And I'm not offering that as a sales pitch. I'm offering it as kind of a leaping off point for research that people may want to do into this themselves. But included in that site is a fairly detailed, you know, and I mean 101 when I say detailed, discussion on the endocannabinoid system. And I think it's something that everybody should know about. So in any case, you know, and for me, when I first heard about it, I was about 15 years into the cellular health field, or what I call the cellular health field. I had never heard of ECS up to that point. even though it was discovered in the 1980s, which was kind of shocking that it just wasn't talked about more. So in any case, that's a little bit about homeostasis and my own personal feelings about ECS. I mean, it's simply fascinating what it does for us, and it's so important that we do everything we can to keep it as strong and healthy as we can keep it.
Now, you have me a little intrigued about the ECS. So what did you learn about ECS in that process?
Well, what I discovered is that, first of all, ECS manages and regulates many of our body's natural functions, and these include mood, cognition, and memory, motor coordination and motor control, appetite, pain perception, immune response, temperature, reproduction, sleep, bone development. And they do that through a very sophisticated network of what is really our body's most complex system of neurotransmitters. And they have receptors literally in every part of the body that counts. Not that everything doesn't count, but the ones that we really think of as most significant have receptors. And this is the brain, the nervous system, the connective tissues, the gonads, the glands, the organs, the immune system, the spleen, the liver, the heart, kidneys, bones, blood vessel, lymph cells, endocrine glands, and reproductive organs. And again, to go back to our site, we've got, a nice graphic that was done by the manufacturer we work with showing the locations of the ECS receptors, and just really to kind of put in a picture what it all looks like. And so if you think about ECS, it's really a bridge between mind and body. And that absolutely fascinated me because of my own experiences with anxiety and how it, kind of tripped over into something that was a debilitating illness for a while and other things that went on over a period of time. And so for me, I kind of like metaphors or analogies, and I mind you, I'm never sure which one is which. But in any case, if you think of your body kind of being an orchestra, the endocannabinoid system is like the conductor of that orchestra, and it basically signals receptors all over the body to adjust to things that are happening around us or inside it in an effort to stay in homeostasis. And what's really cool about this is, its baton are what are called endocannabinoids, and that's where the name comes from, and we manufacture those for ourselves. So that's what endocannabinoids are basically when you, in the reference, of course, to endocannabinoid system. And the last thing I'll add is they kind of act like a key in a lock. An endocannabinoid system goes into the receptor, kind of opens it up and kind of, allows it to kick in and do for us what we need it to do for us to keep in, again, homeostasis.
All right. So what do CBDs do?
Well, you might have noticed a kind of a connection in the word endocannabinoid and cannabis. Basically, nature has provided us with an external source of cannabinoids, and that comes from the cannabis plant. And the great thing about using CBDs is that when you do, it actually upregulates our endocannabinoid system and signals the body to manufacture more endocannabinoid systems and actually build more receptors. And the great thing is that when you have more of these receptors, it increases our body's efficiency in using what's available to it in the form of cannabinoids and actually enhances our baseline of endocannabinoid activity. So you're upregulating one of the most important systems in the body. I mean, it doesn't get any sweeter than that.
All right, now there's a lot of CBD products out there now. Are there different types of CBDs?
Yeah, and I mean, when I said I went under a tarp for 6 weeks, it's kind of why I went under a tarp for 6 weeks. There are many terms that relate to this. A lot of them are going to sound very, very similar and almost overlapping. So I like 101 versions of things. So basically what it comes down to is you have the cannabis plant, and there's really kind of two main things that you can think of as related to that. There is what we commonly have called marijuana for a long time, and that's the leaves and flowering tops. And a term you're going to see whenever you look at anything related to CBD is tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC. So when you see that, you're really referring or kind of hearing about kind of the, the things or the part of the cannabis plant that can produce a high. And then there's a whole other chunk of things that are somewhere numbered about 110 other compounds that actually come from cannabis. And these come from the fiber and seeds. And these are actually active chemical compounds that interact with the receptors in the endocannabinoid system throughout the body, and they lead to various things like altered moods, pain relief, and a whole lot of other health benefits. And so collectively, these are all called cannabinoids, and they include the THC as well. And I'll just carry on. So again, to kind of put this in a perspective, the two most common ones you're going to hear about are going to be the THC factor, or tetrahydrocannabinol, and then you're going to hear something called cannabidiol, or CBD, and that's kind of become a term that refers to a whole host of products that are made from cannabis, and it basically, depending upon the amount of THC that is in it, will either tend to be kind of categorized more in the psychoactive or non-psychoactive side of things. And when we get over into anything that is less than 0.03% of THC, it's considered non-psychoactive, and it's basically termed hemp.
All right, so what CBD do you work with, and why do you work with it?
I work with a product called Path of Purity, and for me it was, again, a law of attraction thing. A number of years ago, I sold a PEMF machine to a herbalist out of New York, and he and I began sort of on the level of working together, and we became friends and all of those good things. And he was part of a group that had set out to create what we called simply the world's most advanced CBD. And I was really drawn to the people that were behind it. The principles, if you will, had done very well in another aspect of life, and were out to make a difference in an area they thought would have a big difference. And so they set out in the CBD side of things, if you will, to see what they could come up with. They invested very heavily, did a whole lot of research, and even their approach to me when I was chatting with them was very much about do your research, give it a try, think about it, all of those kind of good things, which I did. And so Path of Purity basically is a product that's made from 100% organic, what is called phytocannabinoid-rich, or PCR, hemp. And that means it's top quality, and by PCR, it includes what is referred to as full spectrum. One of the things about nature is that it often works best when you put all of it together in the best possible way. And CBD, and research supports this, tend to have the most beneficial effect when you have the full extract or the full spectrum of the 110 plus compounds working in kind of a sum of the parts way. So that was one of the things that impressed me, was where they were beginning. They went out and sourced some very, very high quality cultivars to make sure they were getting just top quality product, as the raw material. They put in place a manufacturing process that is state of the art in a facility that had a very, very long track record in the nutraceutical business, if you will. And what really intrigued me about it was, and I was fairly new to it, but it still intrigued me, was they came up with a 50 milligram tablet as the delivery mechanism for the CBD. And what that was based upon, they had done research that found that the optimal level of CBD delivery in terms of being received by the CB1 and CB2 receptors is 25 milligrams. And so they put together a 50 milligram tablet that would be able to be released 25 milligrams in about the first 30 seconds to 30 minutes. But with the second 25 milligrams set to be released 3 to 6 hours later on average, when the body signaled the need for more. And I just love that because it tied in completely with all the other technologies that we work with that kind of tap into and amplify the body's own ability to heal itself or take care of itself and repair. So I was very impressed by that. They were big into the realization that people might be a little bit, still kind of wondering about the psychoactive thing. So what they did in terms of the THC is they put a formulation together that is actually 0.03%. So it meets the limit of quantitation requirement to be full spectrum, but it dials down the psychoactive aspect to basically to even less than it might otherwise be in some other products. And that's not a knock on other products. It's just to say that's where these guys went. And what I also really liked, and this went back to my herbalist friend, is they sourced ingredients that were just top quality. So, they came up with a perfect mixture of omega-3, 6, and 9 in balance, and that helps reverse dietary and other imbalances that contribute to inflammation. And again, everything was premium. So they used stevia leaves for flavor and that kind of thing. And I kind of had to stop there without, getting into talking about proprietary things. But that'll kind of give you an idea of it. And I don't want to do a complete download here, but the other thing I did was I used it myself, and that has always been the benchmark for me. And what I found with it was really quite interesting. Every spring or winter, and I do a lot of outdoor running, I found that my shins would start to itch. And I always figured it was dry skin, and I'd look down and the hair would be missing. And I always figured that was a case of the friction between the hair on the leg and, the spandex type things that you wear. Anyway, I started taking Path of Purity, and what I discovered shortly thereafter was that the hair started to grow back and the itching stopped, and I was really curious about that. So when I Googled it, I found that men my age will often develop microcirculation issues in the shins. And so this thing Path of Purity addressed that as something that I had kind of mistakenly thought was something else. I've done a lot of exercise. In my life, and you'll see there's someone calling. But anyway,
turn your phone off, James. We're doing a show.
That better be for you, right? Anyway, with all the exercise, I had some wear and tear injury that goes with that, and so the Path of Purity use actually corrected that in my left shoulder to the point I could lift overhead again or comfortably. I was doing it anyway, and also in my knees. But the sweetest of it all, and I'll stop after this, I promise, was last summer in the middle of a heat wave. I came out from a meeting in a sport coat and, in pants, obviously, and was cool as a cucumber looking around at everybody, other than me in kind of tank tops and shorts, fanning themselves. And I realized that Path of Purity was resetting, homeostasis around the temperature in my body. So I was very, very, pleased with that. And then my life partner had a wonderful result with her blood pressure using it. And so, anyway, that's a download. Sorry for that if I went on too long, but you kind of hit a sweet spot for me.
All right. So if somebody wants to find out more about Path of Purity, what should a listener do?
Well, I'm going to ask that they go on our site, and I'll go back into that right again. So it's www, obviously, POP, replenishing PCR-CBD.com. And if you do that, you're going to see a lot of reference, obviously, to the product, but it's also very much intended as an educational leaping off point. There's things in there about the research we did, some research, obviously, that was done by people who are a lot higher in the food chain in that type of, skill set than I am. But we were very fortunate to come across some things. There's a wonderful study that we linked to that was done in about 2007 that talked about the potential of the endocannabinoid system to make a difference in health. So we've kind of included that there, and along with some updated references from NIH as to specific studies done on some of those topics. So again, I'd ask you to have a look at www.pop-replenishingpcrcbd.com to learn more. I will also stress that this is a product that is being sold exclusively through professional health, wellness, and fitness practitioners. So if you happen to be one of those folks and go over there and kind of, tweaks your interest, please click on the Join Our Practitioner Network at the top, and that will give you the opportunity, if you wish, to basically apply to be one of our network affiliates, with the manufacturer. They'll ask you to fill out a couple of questions, etc. And then for those who decide to do that and are approved or accepted, you may want to order a bottle or two, give it a try, and see if it does for you the kind of things it did for me, to give you the confidence that it would be something you'd like to share.
Yeah, and I would like to bring up, I've used it, my whole family's used it, and the great thing about it is, it's just a tablet. You put it under your tongue, it dissolves, because I know a lot of the CBD oil we've tried in the past, just to put it succinctly, it doesn't taste that good. And with this, it is a lot cleaner. It's a lot easier. It dissolves in a couple minutes. And the great thing about it is you can kind of feel, after you've used this for a few days, you can feel it kick in somewhere between the 3 and 6 hours, where, regular CBD, I think it's kind of front-loaded. This, the time release thing is great. The fact that it's a tablet that you can just stick under your tongue. And one of my sons has Asperger's, and once we started taking the CBD, and it was just the regular CBD oil 3 or 4 years ago, it was before I'd even met you, and I can tell you that the product from Path of Purity is, if not the best, one of the best. I sound like I'm just trying to sell it for you, but it is the best. And I'm not going to come on here and say it's not just because James is on here, but the Path of Purity product is the best we've used. It is the easiest to use, and a lot of times, ease of use makes it easier to remember to take it, because, if you're taking something that has a terrible smell or a bad taste, sometimes you just kind of put it off because you don't want to deal with it. But with this product, you don't have that problem.
Well, and thank you for that. And I mean, again, there's a lot of great products out there, and we consider ours the most advanced based upon, the work that was done in putting it together. One of the things that you'll see on our site is actually a third-party bioavailability analysis that was done that actually shows the Path of Purity, in the actual blood serum for about 12 hours, and that's for one tablet. So, it's where the rubber hits the road when you start to see those types of bioavailability. To go to your point, there's no wastage with it, because literally you put it under your tongue and you're good for the day, basically. And we're really excited about it. And one of the other things I would mention to anybody who's considering this, the whole aspect of what you're allowed to do can be it kind of depends where you're living and where you work and all of those things. So anybody who's considering this, you'll find some information on our site that talks about that as well. But more than anything, we would suggest you just make sure what state you're in, or province, as the case may be, or what part of the world, just to make sure that you're kind of consistent with what the rules of the land are. So we'd have passed that on as well. But the world seems to be changing, and certainly CBD is one of the most promising things I've seen in 15 years. And man, do I ever miss it when I don't take it. I know that.
Yeah, and to that point, we've told listeners they could ask questions, but the amount of questions would have made this about a 10-part documentary, or it would have made it the equivalent of 1977's Roots miniseries. So what we're going to do is, James is, over the next week or so, going to go through all the questions, and basically put in a concise as it can be, with 10 or 15 questions that listeners have asked. We appreciate all those questions, but James will put together an article that will be on thegruelingtruth.com that answers all your questions, that will have links to the Path of Purity, that will have links to this show if you got anybody that wants to listen to it. Also, before we go on to what we're going to do next week, I want to remind people that you can hear us every Tuesday at 10 a.m., unless you see something different, at Grueling Truth on Twitter, where we have to change something last second or something. You never know what can happen. Power goes out sometimes here, James, because it storms all the time. Of course, now we're in a drought after 2 weeks of rain. We've had like 2 weeks of nothing, and now there'll probably be some fires here at some point. But, all right, guys, this is Mike Goodpaster, the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Of course, that was our interview a few weeks ago with James Commerford discussing the Path of Purity, CBD. James did write that article, and that article today at approximately noon, 11:30 to 12, we will repost that article on Twitter at Grueling Truth, so you can find it on there if you want to check that out. Also, as you heard, every Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock, you can hear me and James talk about Replenishing Care and Technologies, which is a place if you want overall health and well-being. I think it's the place to go. The packages he has there, from the box socks to the CBD to the PEMF machine, are all top-notch and can all help you. And as James always says, they do no harm. Now, we will have a special show on Friday at 10 o'clock Eastern Time in the morning Friday to talk a little bit more Replenishing Care and Technologies, so you can hear me and James Commerford at 10 a.m. on Friday. We are going to go ahead and we're going to wrap this episode up. And I want to remind everybody, with the Path of Purity, you can find out more about that by going to popreplenishingpcr-cbd.com. We want to thank everybody for listening today, and I want to remind you that you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you find sports podcast. You'll find the Grueling Truth. So for James Commerford, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to the Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.